Yo, Reaper fans, good morning. How are you all this fine and, well, kind of miserable, rainy, cold morning here in Denton? But we're inside and toasty, and these lights are really warm, so I think I'll be okay. How are all of you? I'm just seeing Bug Lips saying, throw things out of the truck.
How you guys doing?
Wrong intro. Tazlan said you got the wrong intro, Justin.
The wrong intro? I didn't think it was actually the wrong intro.
Justin's fault.
Let me see. Shouldn't have been. Here, I'm going to play it again.
He's going to play it again for you.
Oh, no, it is.
Oh, it is the wrong intro.
Honestly, thought it was the Miniature Monday one. I was
Little Debbie mini donuts. I used to really like those. Actually, with the Little Debbie stuff, I really liked those raspberry coconut zingers. Those are my favoriteest thing.
We got it. Here it is. Bam. Okay.
Third time's the charm.
Well, I've been playing with my cannon this morning because I came in and
Your cannon? You're shooting people? What?
Yeah,
we're defending the ramparts? What?
No, I think we might be having some sensor issues potentially.
Sensor issues.
And that's because my color is just way off this morning. It's frustrating the hell out of me.
I feel rosy. I look rosy on the monitor too, so hey, there we go.
Yeah, it's just
everybody.
Everything looks a little desaturated to me for no real reason.
Hi Tazzalanche, hi Rings.
But anyway.
I wish we were in DC Metro then. I used to live out there. It was a really warm winter when I lived out in, I was in around the Baltimore area, so I was really close to DC, and I liked that winter. But sometimes they get hit with like 3 feet of snow, so you know. I still have film canisters. Yes, are you impressed? Are you impressed, Vigos peeps? These I have had since I started at Reaper Miniatures, because back in the day, this was what you used for like mini painting stands, because they were starting to phase out film, so everybody had a ton of them, and they were everywhere, and nobody had a use for them, so we used them for miniature painting holders. But now, of course, it's pill bottles. Pill bottles are all the rage for mini holders if you're looking for the cheap option. I cannot use Sir Forescale Corsair because I did not prep him. I will, however, make a note instantly, well, not quite instantly, but I'll make a note somewhere on this pink piece of paper. Prep Sir Forescale. Here. There we go. I will use Sir Forescale for something. He is, however, not exactly a good, simple NMM model, so probably just as well that we do not have him today. I really like Mr. Orc Berserker. Do I have I use like pennies or old bad minis that I don't like anymore. You know, I punish them, Maladrak, by putting them in here. Let's see what I have here. Yeah, I like this orc. I have, wow, okay, in here, get this, guys. In here, I have some of the very first minis that I used to test Master Series paint, the first batches, 15 years ago. 16 years ago. So like we were using little owls because we had a bunch. That's a random raven with my owls. We were using little owls on the stump because we had a bunch. And so the very first Master Series paint batches, here they are.
You want to show them on the little camera?
Yeah. Like, oh boy, we're really warm on the little cam. But yeah, so this is like the first ever red brick and the first ever blood red on the back there. It was when we still had our old base and our first ever Phoenix orange. Like seriously, this paint is the first paint that I ever made here at Reaper. I'm so happy. Well, now I know where my, 16 years ago, this is first batch MSP. It's been knocking around on a film canister and mostly it still sticks. But yeah, so ta-da! I had those, I assume when I was making this holder that I had those just lying around because, at that point we probably had moved on and produced the first batches. So I thought, well, these are there. I'll use them for weight. So that's historic test owls. Yes, Bug Lips. Exactly. I'm impressed. I didn't even know I still had those. Poor little birdies. No, they're glad. Actually, it's good that they were in there, Vigos, because otherwise they probably would have gotten melted by now. So they actually exist. Good morning, Just Isis. All right, so let's talk about NMM. Now, a lot of people ask for a steel NMM triad, and I currently tell them, because this is something that people on the forums and in the community have discovered, but the Kickstarter triad that we put out this recent Kickstarter 4, these guys are what a lot of people said they were using for a steel NMM triad, and I was like, oh, well, I didn't plan that. But when I tried it, it worked fantastic. Yeah, they belong in the Museum of Paint at Reaper. Yes, that's true. So the reason this works is that normally if you're doing steel NMM, you would choose, say, cloudy gray. You know, you would choose the neutral grays triad, right? Because you want something that's gray, it's steel. And that works, but I've done that, and the problem with it is that you end up looking like you're a black and white sketch. Because when you have steel out in the environment, it's always, 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 yeah, these are up for retail now. You can order them. But it's always got some color reflected, usually sky color, but often other colors as well. So why this works is that it has the moonstone blue that you're using in kind of a mid-tone. You're usually mixing this with a tiny bit of carbon gray to get a neutral gray. And this neutral gray has blue in it because of the moonstone, so it reads more realistically than using the foggy, or the misty and cloudy gray and stormy gray. Now, if you just don't want to do this, and you've got your cloudy gray and your misty gray, and you want that, yeah, you could also use Akata blue. Anything that has a blue in it, you need to throw a blue in there, though. So if you're going to use the regular one, you want to add blue or a different color to your steel NMM. Also, if you're using the regular cloudy gray and misty gray triad for a shadow, stormy gray isn't quite dark enough. I just want you to know that. You want to use either carbon gray or gray liner will work. I used to use gray liner a lot. So yes. Hey, Valandar. Good morning. But yes, so that's what I've got kind of mixed up here. I actually added a little bit of moonstone to my foggy gray as well. Remember, for NMM, you always have to go up to pure white, because for something to look truly shiny, you need that bright white spot. You, if you want, can even use a tiny bit of yellow in your pure white, because again, sunshine, typically not white necessarily, has a yellow or golden cast to it. And that will also read correctly, but keep it very, very bright. You need that highlight in order for it to look shiny. So we're going to do a lot of NMM. I kind of have planned this for the next 2 days. We're going to do the sword. Once I give you the basic principles using the sword, which is an excellent subject for NMM, I will do the chainmail. And then tomorrow we'll probably do the breastplate, because a curved surface changes the rules. Paint triads not far enough to provide good contrast. Actually, they're usually too far in contrast. Like carbon gray is very much darker than moonstone blue. The problem is with triads, Valandar, and this one was actually not meant to be a triad so much as it was kind of a set of light colors or things you could use as neutrals. But often in the early triads, you're going to notice the colors are too far apart. You're going to have to use a 50-50 mix. A great example of this is the purples triad, 90-22 Nightshade, 90-23 Imperial, and 90-24 Amethyst. You've really got to do 50-50 mixes between those to make them work very well as a triad, although you can use Nightshade as a wash over Imperial, and it does work just fine. Yes, the skin triads, Valandar, are very close together for a reason. It's because people have a problem doing smooth skin tones, so by making the colors closer together, I made them easier for you to blend, even if you don't thin them very much. So that is why that is done, because the triads, when it comes down to it, are a helping mechanism. There's something that we're using to try to make it easier for painters who are just getting in or intermediate who don't like to mix. So essentially, it's training wheels for paint. So we're trying to make it a simple thing. If you just don't have the energy, or you just don't have the time, or you just don't want to mix colors, then the triads are a great thing for you. And at the most, you'd only have to mix like 1 drop of each to get a middle shade, which is the easiest sort of mixing. But yeah, you'll find both. You'll find triads that are very far apart, and triads that are very close together. And usually, it has to do with usage. When we're getting to the Kickstarter triads, though, is when it gets hard for me, because having put out over 500 colors, it's hard to come up with a color that we haven't already produced. So that's why you get kind of odd triads like this, where I'm like, I really needed this charcoal gray. Carbon gray is your off black, guys. if you put the layer of this down and put a black wash over it, it reads like a very fast black. It's your super quick black. Is this plus a black wash. I made it specifically because I had friends who were painting armies who needed them to be black but also wanted quick shading on them, like a quick highlight. And so they got it all in 2 steps with this. Moonstone blue is a color I've been wanting to do for a long time. I actually, I love it. I love blue grays in general, or gray blues. Foggy gray, I really wanted a much lighter gray than misty. I wanted a neutral gray off-white, and so that's what foggy gray is. And they were similar enough in that kind of neutral, stony, misty kind of thing. It reminds me kind of like, you know, rainforest, like rivers up in like the national parks, like I was just at Yosemite. Like winter rivers and river valleys. That's what this reminds me of. Stone colors and watercolors and mist colors. So anyway, that's why this works, but it's also a great steel NMM color, triad. So for NMM, I almost always will base coat. I usually will base coat either with the mix I do here, which is about 6 drops of moonstone and then like a drop or a drop and a half or 2 drops of carbon gray to bring it down. Carbon gray is very strong, as you can tell. Or I will base coat in cloudy gray, which is close enough. And for a base coat, it doesn't matter if it's a true neutral. Let me see here. Thanks, Evil Elvis. I'm glad you like my triads. Yeah, nobody else had been doing it at the time, and I felt like it was a good tool because I was constantly, I was teaching people even before I came to Reaper. I would always teach at Gen Con and other conventions, and I found that people just had this huge mental block when it came to mixing, especially when they just got into the hobby, and I didn't necessarily blame them because, you know, when I started painting, it was the same. So I thought that the triads would be a good way for them to kind of learn, and like I said, if they had to learn to mix like a half and half or a 50-50 mix of 2 of those colors, that would be a good way for them to slowly get comfortable with mixing. So, and that's the goal, is to get you comfortable with the techniques, all of them, even color techniques, so that you have more freedom in your painting. Yeah. Pure blue-green. I don't know Vallejo's MC blue-green. Model color blue-green. We have, it varies, rings. The problem with our pigments is when you mix them 50-50, you actually get a shift toward blue because the blue pigment is stronger than the green. So to get a true blue-green that's right in the middle, we actually, there's actually more green pigment in it than blue, weirdly. It's the way pigments work. It's not always intuitive. That said, because when we started out, we wanted coverage, we ended up adding some white to that initial marine teal triad. The closest thing now would be probably the turquoise color in HD, which I think is coming back. I'm pretty sure it is. Or if you've got the phthalo colors from ReaperCon, which hopefully also should be out in their own ReaperCon set soon, or soon-ish, I should say, maybe by the end of the year. Oh, it's up to Ed. But then you'd be able to do it just by mixing those pure pigments. And you would notice that they were very saturated but lacked some coverage. You could get there with clear green and clear blue, but the problem there is that clear green has a little bit of a yellow shade green, and so because it does have a little bit of that yellow shade green, when you mix it with the blue, it gets a little bit muted, just a little bit muted. I'm just going to block this all in, which is what I usually do with NMM. I'm just going to pretty much set this up as block in so that you guys can see what I'm doing, more or less. There. But yeah, the problem really with producing a true vibrant blue-green is that it will be see-through, tremendously see-through. And although that works for people who are familiar with paint and experienced, it doesn't work so well for newbies who get the paint and they're like, why can I see through this? Why is it not covering? So that's always been kind of the challenge with clear brights. And as we educate people about the clears, we might be able to do a clear blue-green. But that's down the road a bit. So I'm just pretty much blocking some stuff in here. Oh no, I went too light. Maybe not. Let's get some water. Actually, Cougs, I'm working pretty thick right now because I'm just blocking these in. I'm not trying to layer so much as I want to show you kind of the theory behind the NMM. So right now, I think it's probably a 4:3 to 1 paint to water. So that's why they're so thick and why they're showing the brush strokes. So all right, here's the dealio. Yeah, I got the Indiana Jones reference actually, Ashley. This belongs in a museum. All right. So NMM. First of all, he's a great model for this because he's got, and I need to look at his face. I actually curved that and I shouldn't have. Because he's got a very simple sword. And this is similar to any sword that you're going to find, like any straight-bladed sword, although most of them actually have kind of a diamond tip instead of this flat tip, but this is essentially, it's that faceted edge. You've got the back part, and then you've got a facet that makes your edge. In this case, this is actually the edge because he's holding it upside down, but the light doesn't know that, so the light's going to act this way. In any case, those of you who are out there, did you ever paint the old NMM Learn to Paint kit that I did back years ago? If you did, this will be very familiar.
Also, Corsair had a question for you there.
Gray liner over black? Gray liner over black. Why would you? Black is darker than gray liner. Or are you saying bring black up with gray liner? Gray liner in that case is probably not light enough to be an effective highlight for black.
Also, thank you for the sub, Madam Gorgonzola.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so essentially, here's how light works, folks. It's going to make the top part brighter. Wherever the surface cuts away from your line of vision, that's where you're going to see a line of shadow. Right above where that cuts away from your line of vision, you're actually going to see a bright highlight. So I'll mock that in just with it. I'm just very quickly going to kind of set up. Ooh, my foggy gray got very thin. Let me add more to it. Stay, sword. There we go. Let's add a little strength to our foggy gray. Although that's a very, very good consistency for layering, it's not a very good consistency for just drawing a line to show you what I mean. Yeah, exactly, Bug Lips. Yeah, I really liked that kit because it was a real challenge to write those directions to describe NMM in 2 pages. It actually made me clarify the points that I'm outlining today. So sometimes I feel like painters, when they teach, don't make an effort to necessarily simplify things as much as they could if they really broke it down. And this is probably due to the fact that a lot of us just don't think that way. But I've always liked to do that, to simplify things, because it makes them more accessible. And the more I can simplify something, the more people won't be intimidated and the more people will actually try it. So I've always been a fan of simplification.
John posted a Discord question. They want to know if Reaper will ever make a texture paint. Did we answer that question last week?
We did not, but essentially that's really an Ed question. It's been talked about, I know. But
I swear we talked about that last week.
We talked about it, but then we kind of went, well, and really we went, well, because maybe is the answer, and we are not the people who know that answer. And in fact, I don't know that has been firmly decided upon yet. So if you feel like Reaper needs to make a texture paint, you should pretty much tell Ed, hey, Ed, I really feel like Reaper needs to make a texture paint. I would totally buy it, and you might want to be more specific than that. Like, what specific texture are you looking for? Are you looking for mud? Are you looking for a quick basing solution? Like, any input that we get helps us kind of target resources, because, we don't want to just go out usually and just duplicate what other people are already doing. What we really like is to find out something that is out there maybe, but not in the form that people really would like, so that we can kind of target what might be our best moves. Because I, at least as a paint line designer, I always just I hate going out there and just doing what other people are doing. I think it's kind of a waste of energy when we could be maybe putting that energy towards something that is maybe more needed in the hobby, right? There may be something out there that people don't have at all yet, and that would be more useful to pinpoint than to just make a duplicate of another company's product. The exception to that is if we can do it where if the other company doesn't have really good penetration in the market or isn't really in the United States, or we could do it significantly less cost, then we could consider it, But again, it's an Ed question. And the more specific you can be in what you want, And so the right question to ask isn't so much, hey, will Reaper ever do this, as, hey, I would really love for Reaper to do this because I feel like, it would be useful because. And then to follow that up with, is there ever a chance that Reaper would do this? So yeah, just asking for stuff isn't so useful, but asking for stuff and giving reasons why it would be a good move for Reaper, it would be much more useful. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm mocking out my NMM. So I'm just going to be painting, and then I am actually going to tell you in non-zero. Yeah, no Train Tuesday, although I was going to offer to take it, but I didn't get to that point before we had to make the show live this morning. I can't do a trebuchet, but I could do some stonework or something. What do you think, Justin?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
We should do that?
Yes, we should.
All right. I'll have to find a good model for it. I actually, I had a good model for it yesterday, and then I took it home to wash it. And I didn't get it washed yesterday because it's bones. So I'll have to pull another model out to work on.
Also, to reinforce kind of what John said there, because Vigos asked, there is no Terrain Tuesday today.
There's no Ed Terrain Tuesday.
There's no show at 3 today.
Oh, okay. Well, I meant I would take it if you wanted me to.
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay.
We've already
announced that it's not going to happen.
Correct. Yeah.
And so we don't want to confuse people by going back on that.
That would
if I would have, I should have just texted you this morning.
And I'm going to use the time to process giveaways.
Yay! Oh well, then we don't want to get in the way. Justin is always bold and beautiful, Bug Lips. Come on.
Yes, Well, he calls me a manimal because he watches
Yeah,
me.
Vigos, that was falsely. There was a misunderstanding. I will not do Ed's show today, Justin, because we've already announced on all the social media that it won't be going on. It would just confuse people to try to reverse that.
Right, to just go back, delete
the
post.
So for the future, ask me, text me in the morning.
Yeah,
say,
no
hey,
problem.
will you be up for doing? Because I can always do a different sort of terrain for the future. But today, no 3 o'clock show.
Painting terrain.
Yeah, painting terrain.
That would be okay, too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do, if I did it.
But yes, Bug Lips actually calls me Manimal because he watched me play Escape from Tarkov. So he's...
I see.
Yeah, him and Quindy are kind of a tag team and making fun of me on that game. It's kind of great. She makes fun of me when I stand still, and he makes fun of me when I don't do enough.
So you have people constantly making you strive to get better. That's perfect. Fantastic.
It's absolutely golden.
Here, I had to move my card there.
Makes the game more fun for sure.
Just so you all know, this is this model, and I do consider him a very good practice model for NMM. Stonework from scratch, guys, is so easy with just cork and green stuff, and I can't even. If you're looking for actual arches and architecture, then you need to do styrene, and that is Bob Rodolfi's domain. I could not even begin to do something as awesome as Bob could teach you. So maybe we need to have Bob do a stream sometime on that for Terrain Tuesday. Maybe when the artists are here sometime. That would be fun.
So real quick, brief overview maybe for people who are just coming in.
All right,
kind of what you've done so far.
Sorry, I'm mixing up colors so I can better illustrate. But yes, okay guys. So let me put my triad down here again. Bloop, and make it visible. There. All right, so to kind of very quickly reiterate all the talking I did at the start of the show, this is a great triad of colors to use for NMM steel. It is a great triad for NMM steel because it has a very light gray, a very dark gray, and a color that is a grayish but blue. You need another color in your mix for your NMM steel to look real. And usually you want a blue because of sky reflection, but if you are trying to give the idea of a cloudy day, or you want something painted more in that kind of muted tone, you could instead put in browns or greens in your reflections, which is an advanced thing, but to get an idea, you need some color in there other than black and white, or it just looks like a black and white sketch. It doesn't look real. All right, so I laid down an initial coat of, I think I did cloudy gray at this point. I don't care about what gray I use for my base coat because I'm going to paint over it. I just want it there so that when I start wet blending, I don't have to worry about covering over the white or light gray of the bones. I do that actually with all the time that I'm working over bones or anything. The biggest problem with bones with wet blending is making sure you're covering up your primer or your base color. If you just put a base coat down, you don't have to worry about that. You can work over the top of it. And cloudy gray is very close to this mix here that I did of moonstone and carbon, which is my base that I'm working in right here. So you have to identify what surface is up toward the sky and which surface is down toward the model or the ground or both in this case. You're going to essentially say your upper surface is going to be lighter, just across the board in general, for your base coat. I think I started around here. For your lower surface, right under that edge, where the edge cuts away from your eye, where the light essentially, where it starts to be shadowed, essentially, because the light is falling on the top. Then you want a darker color, a darker strip of color. The darker you make that color, the shinier the surface is going to look. You usually don't go all the way toward pure black, though. You usually go toward either carbon gray or gray liner, which next to white is honestly dark enough to appear black. So that's how I started it out, just blocking in the colors. So here, I'll put a strip of carbon gray so you guys can see that looks very shiny now. Now, we're missing something, though. We're missing reflective. And that means that if you got that black or dark, near black line up there, you blend it back up. See how I've started to highlight this underside? Because light is bouncing back up at the underside of the blade from the environment, from this NMM here, from his light skin, from everything around. So your shadow, the shadow side, unlike with a sleeve that's in shadow, this being reflective means that it's going to be much lighter than any other surface that's normally pointed toward the ground will be. So we will take a little bit of a lighter gray. We'll probably mix our gray mix here with yet more Moonstone Blue. And just to bring it up a bit. And one other thing I can do is, like, I could maybe add in some green on this underside to simulate her skin. You know, if there was some purple here, if I made his belt purple or brown, I could put a little bit of color suggesting that that was reflecting. It's just little things, and you don't have to be precise about it. A lot of people freak out about like colored reflections or reflections from the environment, but in reality, it's just generalizing, and as long as you're close, you'll be batting 1,000. Even a little suggestion of it will add to the realism of the NMM. So essentially, as I go toward the edge of the blade, and I'm just blocking this in, I'm not blending it or anything. And this is something that I will often do with NMM. I may just block it in to make sure that it's looking correct in my eyes, and then I'll start blending it. So, you know, the more I take up that, see how that brings up that bottom edge and makes it more, makes it more like it's reflecting colors and light. What I did on the top here, even though your top edge is generally going to be lighter and the highlights are going to be much lighter than anything that shows up down here, there are going to be spaces of shadow, and that's from stuff getting reflected in the environment. So say there's a tree limb above him, that's going to put a shadow in between him and the sky, and it's going to be reflected on this blade. So for realism in NMM, you'll see a lot of people now doing this. They will introduce bands of dark and light up and down both sides of the blade. And I'll actually do that on this underside as well. But I'm probably going to use like a hint of color to do it rather than just using a dark color. So the purest form of NMM is just to make your top lighter, your dark darker, to highlight it a little bit lighter toward the bottom edge, and to make sure you put a white line going down the center of the blade, and also a white line on the top of the blade. The reason for that is, again, your light is hitting up here on the top part, and it's going to hit those edges and be very strong. So I'll take my pure white. Yes, this is one that you probably will need to go back up. So I got a little bit thick with my line there. It's not a big catastrophe. I can just wet my brush real quick and go and kind of fudge out the line a little bit. Just make it a little bit thinner. If you throw water at the paint before it sets, you can wipe out if you make a mistake very easily. You just kind of scrub at it a little bit with your brush. Then I gotta wait for it to dry. I'm gonna put, the other reason that I'm kind of focusing this light right here is in like some models are holding their swords straight out, right? Like imagine that he's up here and he's holding his sword out to the side. So then you have the perfect blade, right? You've got the upper edge pointed directly up at the sky, the whole edge is pointed that way, and the whole bottom edge is pointed down at the ground. But that's not the case with this guy. He's actually on an angle. So really, the light is gonna hit like on the upper part of his blade and bounce. So I had to kind of make a judgment call as to where I thought that would look good or be appropriate. And I decided kind of upwards of center of the blade would be, and I'm also going to add a highlight here at the top of the blade. And that's why I'm doing that. So just like you get shadow bands from things that are interrupting the light, you also get points where the light gathers and bounces toward your eyes, because most of the time the entire top of the blade isn't going to be flashing toward your eyes. In a curved blade, it's impossible for that to happen. In straight blade, it is possible for that to happen. But even then, you will usually have one brighter point that simulates the sun that's hitting the blade. If you weren't already blinded, you would notice that. But, you probably would be if somebody was flashing, the blade of their sword at you in order to blind you in a fight. Let me put another highlight. So I'm going over a lot of complex stuff today, but the big thing to remember is on the upper part of your blade, it's going to be lighter. Where it cuts away from your eye, it is going to be very close to pure white, or actually pure white at wherever the most intense point is. Right under that brightest highlight, you're going to have a dark band of shadow, very narrow usually at its darkest point, that will then come up toward another under a reflection, another highlight on the underside of the blade, which is made from light bouncing back up from the environment. So physics, we're talking about physics today because NMM is physics, whether we like it or not.
See, these are the sorts of gems that I get when Buck Lips comes into my stream.
Oh.
Right here, these sorts of gems.
Flashing to blind people is your favorite way to fight? I figured it was, Bug Lips. I figured it was. Bug Lips, keeping it very Lovejoy in 2020. Although Aaron was on best behavior when he was here the other night. He only made it, there were only a couple of dirty jokes. Would you also have the white line along the lowest edge? No, Coobs, you would not have a pure white line, but you have a close. You'd have a light gray. I would use misty gray, or in this case foggy gray, to do your highlight along the lower edge. And yes, because the light is reflected, but it's not nearly as strong as the direct sunlight. That is why.
Hey, Mike, thanks for the raid.
Hey, thanks for the raid.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mike is cool. Hey guys, you're here for Reaper Toolbox Live, and we are painting non-metallic metal. So I am essentially painting a sword blade on this lovely orc, Berserker, whose item number is in the lower frame there. And I just answered a question about putting a lighter reflection on the underside of my blade, which I am totally going to do. Now I'm going to turn the model around so that I can do it in a natural direction for my hand, because you're just getting paint on the brush and you're just using the edge of your brush to suggest that line. Now, just like up top, there are going to be lighter and darker sections on the underside of the blade, and so for me, looking at it, I think the brightest reflection is probably going to be with the NMM reflecting up here. And so I'm going to choose to put a lighter section here-ish. And it kind of is opposite this, and that's not accidental. So let me just block that in and see, just blocking it in to kind of see if it looks right. Blending it in a little bit with a little bit of my lighter gray. And yeah, you could blend this from the beginning, and get a, you wouldn't waste the time I am kind of blocking it in. But if I'm using a blade with a very odd shape, I just like to go a little slower and make sure that it looks right, because NMM is hard enough as it is, and really to create the illusion, it's gotta look right. So doing a block in first to kind of judge it, it's a good idea. And likewise, I think I'm gonna put this secondary highlight here that I've got just a little bit of light glancing off the blade down here. I'm gonna move it a little and maybe shift this one up a little. You kind of want them to alternate, like you've got highlight, highlight, highlight. Kind of want that. And I'm still working. And at this point is where, once I have everything positioned, that's where I'm going to start working with thinner paint so that I can get the blending down. I think I'm going to put another highlight up here. And I'm going to probably hit that with some green. I think I've got, maybe I don't have my green. I might have to mix it. I use for orc skin, I start with pale olive, 9036. I really like it for orc skin, and you can put almost any dark green, olive green, or brown over it to get a good start on orc skin. For basics. It's what I used for the Revan army back when we were painting Warlord. I'm going to try this highlight out and see if I like it. I don't want to lose my dark shadow here, though. Got to make sure I don't lose that entirely. One thing to say, if the model is, say, holding the sword in their hand, you know how some models are holding their sword and they're holding it point down, where the sword is just digging into the ground and they're just kind of holding it there, the tip of the sword digging in the ground, so it's vertical. Then you would definitely want to alternate, kind of like I'm doing here. You would want to do a highlight, 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 you know, shadow, 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 diagonal from each other. That's because you're probably going to have dark and light on both sides of the blade, and you're going to want that, just have that pure white line down the middle, and to work both sides of the blade. If there's not, if the light is coming from above, it's just going to be bouncing light on the blade down below. But that is, again, a more complex treatment of NMM. So basics are always make your upper surface generally lighter than your lower surface. Notice how I'm bringing it up a little bit now. I'm using a little bit of my mixture of Moonstone Blue and my gray to blend things in and make the upper surface noticeably lighter. See it? You're still carrying it. We've still got a couple of lighter patches down here, and I'm going to decide how I feel about those in a minute. Yeah. Straight up. Yeah, like Surf Force Skull. Yes. Anything being, if your light source, and it's always dependent on your light source, Coops, because if you have a model holding a blade straight up, but you're using a diagonal light source, it's all going to change. But yes, if you're using a zenith light source straight up, you know, falling straight down on the miniature, like a sunshine at noon, then yes, a straight up and down blade, you would also probably diagonal it because it's going to look better. Let's see here. I want to blend that in a little bit better. Not sure about that. Really not sure about this highlight. I'm probably going to wipe it out. The reason for that is his arms are so close together and his back is right there. The blade is really close to him. So when I'm moving it, I can see that it's in shadow. And so I don't want to try to paint something that's not realistic. So I'm going to wipe that out. And only a secondary highlight, I'm probably going to center it more here and keep this dark. So we're going to block it. Block out the highlight I put in for the most part. Grab some of my medium gray. I have too much water on my brush. There. Kind of reblock in my bottom edge here so that it's not lighter anymore. And I'll probably put a pretty strong shadow up in this area in general, grabbing from my carbon gray, because it is so close to everything up there that it's not going to get much light. Even reflected light isn't gonna hit it very much. So we'll just keep that dark. That means we don't have to worry about it. Yeah, I think I don't remember if I did those guides, Bug Lips, the old painting guides for the armies. I might have done, I think I did some of them. I don't remember. I think I did. But man, it's been years. The Warlord painting guide, the painting guide in the Warlord book was actually for the longest time my favorite painting guide that I had done for Reaper. So I got a chance to, you know, take up 20 pages of photos and text, and I feel I'm fairly strong on writing about paintings, so I just really liked how that one turned out. All right, so we've got our shadow for sure on the bottom side of the blade, but we have some reflected light. I'm probably going to expand that a bit so that it's kind of in between these two highlights here to give it a more balanced appearance. And because this NMM would be reflecting up like that, especially if the light's coming down like that. So we're going to put a little bit more of a highlight. And I'll probably bring up my highlight just along the bottom edge, even though I took the broader highlight off. I still want a little bit of a bottom edge highlight because that under reflection really is what says reflective. It's what tells the eye that the surface is reflective. So that's what we're looking like, and it's getting better. Yeah, you can see it. Do I ever use brown for earth sky? Yeah, if I'm doing true sky earth evil Elvis. However, this is important to say is you only see really true sky earth on chrome. Most armor in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance was not particularly perfect. Well, it wasn't perfect chrome, right? Most of it was pretty burnished. So I really feel like really crisp sky earth is incorrect for medieval minis. Maybe for some fantasy models, if you're like, this armor is magical, so it's going to look a lot like chrome, it's going to be crazy shiny, that's fine. But I typically don't use really sharp sky earth. What I will do instead is introduce brown as a reflection if the earth is brown. And introduce, I almost always use blue, a hint of blue to mimic the sky. If I'm really doing sunny day, then yeah, I might do a stronger blue. Like we could actually take our moonstone and hit that upper edge. Let me throw a little more water into it though. I want it to be a little more thin because it is pretty strong out of the bottle. And let's glaze a little bit of a sky blue. The other blue I really love to use for Sky Earth is Ashen Blue 9057. It's Templar Blue's highlight. Yeah, shoe polish over bare metal is an old historical painting trick, and they did it because, well, they didn't have access to great paint. Now you guys have access to great paint. Many, many different great paints. So I could like put a bit more blue. I could even, if I went down and got my Ashen Blue, I could do even more. It's really, do you want it hints or do you want it really strong? And remember that if you do it very strong, it may kind of distract a bit. Like, then people are going to wonder if it's a blue sword blade. You have to be very careful with color in your NMM. You really you want the effect first, color second. How about that? Now, I did actually, I would like to do a Sky Earth tutorial. I'm going to do one for my Patreon for sure, but I want to do one for here as well. Because a lot of people try it, and a lot of people make it look very bad. And there are just certain principles for doing it, and it's not hard. Once you have this basic idea of NMM, doing Sky Earth is not hard at all, because you're still going to do the same thing. It's just your dark shadow is essentially your horizon line. So you have to be able to think a little bit more creatively about how stuff reflects, or work from actual models in nature to make sure that you're accurate. To do any NMM, NMM is your portal to thinking really about how light acts on different surfaces. If you can do NMM convincingly, you can do almost any effect in paint, because you're essentially learning to think about how light acts and not just painting to numbers or anything. Making the old painting guides available. Magnetic Gumby, honestly, I'd rather rewrite them. I'd rather see rewrites of them. There's so much more information. I could write a much better painting guide now than I did then. Or at least, because some of the stuff that I would bring up, or colors that I bring up in there, there's better colors for it now. There's different products, there's different lighting, available now that's superior to what I recommended back then. I use a porcelain well palette now and don't so much, test stuff on a tile. There's a lot of things I did then that I would do differently now. So old guides, I find, although interesting, usually are not as good as guides that are written with the latest products and technology in mind. That said, you can still probably find copies of the old Warlord rulebook on eBay and at half-price bookstores. I don't know. We don't have it anymore, though, do we, Justin? We discontinued it? The old Warlord book?
I
never know.
Yeah, you're talking about the not second edition one, correct?
Well, didn't both have the painting guide?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
If they both had the painting guide. I assume they would, but...
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either what's actually discontinued or not, because sometimes I feel like it's not discontinued for the website, but it just is for distributors, right?
Magnetic Gumby, that's actually one of my goals on my Patreon. Like, it's a far ahead goal because it would cost so much to do. And I didn't, Reaper kind of went apart from books. Like, we didn't, it's not really feasible for us in a lot of ways. Books are kind of, we do a book at, like, we produced Doug's book, I think, Doug Cohen's painting book. But that's an exception. So I don't know if I would be able to do a painting book for Reaper. I don't know if there's room for that. That's an Ed's question.
Did we even produce Doug's book, though? Because Doug did everything himself.
Doug did everything himself, but then I think we actually got its ISBN, and we got it into distribution. We got it, I don't know.
I see what you mean. Like, we didn't publish it. But
yeah, we kind of did. Yeah, exactly. So,
we really had no hand in the help of the book itself.
Right. He created the book entirely. He wrote it. He did all the pictures and everything like that. Yeah. I know that right now I certainly would not have the time to write a book. To give you guys an idea, it would probably take over a year because of all the work in progress photos you would need to do, all the writing you would need to do, and then just editing, cleanup, layout, everything like that. Doing a painting book is a huge endeavor. People have been asking me for one for about 20 years, to give you an idea. But now that self-publishing is like, a rage, now that and now that the software is out there for you to do what Doug did, essentially write your own painting book, lay it out yourself. I don't know how much layout he did, actually. I'm not sure.
I don't know either.
Yeah, skill set. You need so many skill sets to produce a really nice painting book. It's an interesting question, though. Paints that have become go-tos. Well, a lot of you will already know. Yeah, I also like books, Magnetic Gumby, I assume. Go-to colors. Well, obviously, like I usually bring up my go-tos in every separate video, Corsair. So, like for leather, I love ruddy leather. I love russet brown. Ruddy leather, I like to highlight with orangey colors or skin tones, even like sunrise orange. And driftwood brown, russet brown 91.99. I like to highlight with driftwood when I'm doing leather. So things like that. There are way too many for me to go into all of them here. So it's better to find out what my go-tos are for each particular thing according to what you're painting. Otherwise, I'd give you this huge long list to paint, and it wouldn't make too much sense because I'd be like trying to remember every color that I love and use. And there are quite a few. I keep trying to pare down my collection and like use fewer colors, and for some reason, it's just not working. So there, you can see that over the dark gray, I think it shows up better. So here, you can see, hopefully, I have a line of pure white at the top of the blade, because honestly, it's obviously the sun is going to be falling brightly on there. I have a line of pure white down the middle of the blade, which I probably need to brighten just a little bit, because it's really only reading as white here. I have a dark shadow right under that highest highlight, that line of pure white, and then I'm bringing up to another highlight down at the lower edge that is the under reflection, light bouncing back from the environment. The under reflection will never be as bright as your strongest highlight, your main reflection, where the light is hitting the blade and bouncing off and hitting your eyes. You do not have to be precise in this. You can fudge your physics a little. What's most important is that it looks right. So I may not have my highlight positioned exactly correctly on this blade for, what I'm doing, but as long as I'm close enough, it'll look fine. And mostly I go by my gut instinct on that. It helps if you look at a lot of metal. What I usually recommend people do is go to Renaissance fairs, because you can go to the weapon booths and look at how all the weapons and armor are reflecting the light. And I have photos, I have reference photos. If I go on a particularly interesting day, the most interesting thing I discovered last time I went to the Ren Fair and took pictures was that the swords that they had actually indoors, like they were in a kiosk that had a definite roof cover, so none of the swords were getting direct light. They were getting bounce light from the environment, and I was astonished at the amount of color that was actually reflected in those swords, even though they weren't actually close to the outdoors. Like, they were still reflecting the blue of the sky, they were still reflecting the green, especially the green, of the surrounding vegetation. So going and looking at these things, and you don't have to duplicate exactly what you see, because a lot of it may not transfer very well to a smaller scale model, like if you're working on 28 mil. But it will, doing something that's at least similar, like drawing from it. Like I could I do not have a bright green with me. I have failed. But if I did a bright green on this sword, it probably would read that same way. Like I could add a little bit of green in here. I could add a little blue in up here. I did not bring a lot of saturated colors because I was planning on just NMM basics today. I wasn't planning on colored reflections. So maybe tomorrow we'll do a little bit of colored reflections. And right now I'm just refining. Like I'm honestly taking thinned paint, I'm making my highlights brighter, I'm gonna make my shadow darker. And the more I do that, the closer it looks to real. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Tazlanch, great. Morning, Mad Mardigan, just saw your hello. Yeah, blacksmith shop, same thing, right, really? I mean, and there are blacksmiths in various cities, you would be amazed. But yeah, so any place that you can go to look at, or reenactment organizations, like my ex-husband is actually in a Viking reenactment and combat club, and they get together and do Viking things on the weekends. So that would also be a good one, because they've all got, their axes and spears and shields. So it's a good opportunity maybe to meet some neat people and to get a look at stuff. Let's see here. I know, leaving the house without a bright green, right, Thunderflux? Like, I should really just have a set of clear brights up here because I can mix everything from that, and that way, if I got it, like, because I always get sidetracked during these things, and I always get ideas on what to cover for you guys based on what you ask me, and that way I would be prepared for anything. And try to blend in this too much, too thick. Remember, the lighter your paint gets, the more you have to thin it to get blending. But you guys get the idea. I think this actually looks like pretty good NMM at this point. I just have to blend it a bit better. If you notice that you're really not getting good blends, you can always glaze a lighter gray over the top section to bring it all up, like I just did. So that brings it all upwards. I don't know, I'm still not quite happy with this area. I think I need more highlights on it. I'm going to bring it up a little bit. What time is it, Justin?
It is 12 o'clock.
Perfect. So, yeah. So we'll just do a little bit more highlighting here in the underside of the blade and bring it up just a little bit more so that I get that under reflection strongly through the whole thing. Didn't quite get to the chainmail today. We'll have to do that tomorrow.
Yeah, this is only part 1.
Yes, this is only part 1. Yeah, I knew it would take longer than one day. It's NMM. It's very complex. And chainmail is actually really stupid easy, but it helps if you've already know these basic rules that I've laid out today, then doing the chainmail becomes really simple. Doing NMM chainmail is a nice way to get an early win for yourself doing NMM. Yeah, that'll probably be tomorrow, Coops. I'll try to do the NMM chainmail example really fast so that I can start the breastplate. Because the breastplate, when you're working in a rounded surface, then NMM takes on a whole new level of complexity. I'm bringing that up a little bit. There we go. Yay. And sometimes if you want to do kind of a streaky light appearance where you don't want to blend it in, but you want to leave some slight lines, that's permissible in NMM. It kind of, suggests light glancing off of things sometimes. Some people hate it, some people like it. It's up to you whether you want to use it. Just like in all else in mini painting, there are definite styles involved, styles and fads involved in NMM. And whether NMM itself is popular is also a style or fad. It tends to wax and wane opposite the true metallics. I think we're kind of at a middle ground right now with those two things, actually. I see people promoting both at various intervals. So perhaps perhaps the war of metallics versus NMM is finally resolved to the inevitable answer of both.
Yeah, they can coexist.
They can, in fact, coexist. So there you go. So now you can see how my streakiness here on my highlight, and the fact that it's a little bit stronger here, actually adds to the realism of the piece. It kind of implies that light is bouncing off of the surface in an irregular fashion. So there we are. And then there's demi-metallics, which just are pretty much, shaded metallics that are a little bit duller. Because when you add regular paint or pigments to metallics, you will dull the shine. And you get more control, more like NMM, and you paint them like NMM. And it's like shaded metallics taken down a notch. So you have to punch your highlights artificially.
Oh, no.
That's what shaded metallics are, Rings.
Don't punch your highlights.
I'm totally punching my highlights, man. They can take it. They're strong. What does not kill my highlights makes them stronger. Yeah. All right. Just looking out here. Yeah, metallic paint Rings, just to clarify, with metallic, shaded metallics, a lot of people do exactly that. They're using the same principles as with NMM, and they're just applying them with metallic paint. Remembering at the same time that you kind of have to control your shininess of your highlights and shadows to get that to read correctly. Like, you definitely want your highlights to be pure metallics, whereas a lot of people do shaded metallics by putting a more opaque paint over their metallic substrate, so that their shadows do not reflect as strongly as their highlights do. So that's key, because the thing with NMM, and the reason why people like it, and the reason why especially people like it if they're photoing their models, is that NMM gives you ultimate control over where the eye goes, where your highlights are, where your shadows are. Metallics don't photo as well because they're essentially willy-nilly reflecting light from everywhere. So if you want a metallic to paint more like NMM, you use opaque regular paint for your shadows with maybe only a little bit of metallic added in, or maybe some gloss varnish added in, or gloss sealer. That gives it just a little bit of shine, so it all looks like it belongs on the same surface, but that way the greatest shine is still on the bright metallic parts, so you can control the highlights and where the light bounces the most strongly. That work, Rings? Did you get that? Purple heart is my favorite heart, by the way, because purple is awesome. So yeah, there you go. And yeah, I used to paint with demi-metallics a lot, Bug Lips, because I liked having more control over highlights and shadows, like NMM, but I still liked the metallic sheen in places. Yeah, good deal. All right, guys, any more questions? I don't know. I guess I could. You can't really see his sword from there. Oh, you'll be back. There we go. There we go. Yay, there we are. We have sword. There we are. So there's your S word. The orc looks so unfinished next to that sword. There's some little things too, like I should have a highlight on the end here, because it's obviously light is going to be bouncing up from the environment. So I need a lighter highlight on that edge. There. And that really caps it off.
That looks really good.
Yep. Boom. Indeedy. All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out with me for an hour. This was fun. Tomorrow I'm going to continue with the steel NMM. And thanks to the person who originally requested it, because it was a topic we hadn't done, and I really love doing steel NMM. Gold NMM is a pain in the butt because of all the colors that could go into it, but steel NMM is kind of fun for me. So yeah, we'll do chainmail the beginning of tomorrow's lesson, drawing upon the stuff that I can now point out on the sword. And then we'll try to see what we can get down on the breastplate, as that's a rounded surface and that's a totally different animal. So yeah, eventually it is. Little Blueberry, honestly, one of the best movies to watch, or set of movies to watch for NMM, is Lord of the Rings. I sat and stared at Fellowship of the Ring, like all the swords and the One Ring, until it finally hit me. Like, I think it was actually watching Fellowship of the Ring for the 4th time when NMM just sunk into my brain. It was like, just look at things, look at metal things in your environment and think about how this applies. Think about where the light's falling from. Think about where you can see shadows, stuff like that.
All
yes.
right.
Oh, wait, I should promote my Patreon. I always forget to do it at the end of the show. So yeah, I actually do have a lesson on breastplate, NMM, and all the rest of it on my Patreon from last year. I think it's a $2 lesson too, so it's super cheap. My Patreon is patreon.com/paintingbig, and I did it on a dark sword warrior model, and it's actually got a shiny breastplate that's multi-segmented, and he's in pretty much full plate on the upper torso. He's also got a helmet, so I kind of talk about these principles on that, and I talk about how they apply and show you the different steps. So yes, go check out the Patreon if you haven't. I've got some free stuff up there too.
Thanks, Sam.
You bet. You guys have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow, bright and early-ish.
I have a raid set up, and today we're going to reach out and do something a little different than normal. Mm-hmm. We're going to raid a painter, but they're doing some Photoshop painting.
Cool.
And it looks like simulated watercolors. It's a lady,
that's so cool.
Yeah, the lady's doing like a meadow. She's using a reference photo and she's painting. It looks really good.
A meadow in digital watercolor. That's awesome.
That's what it looks like to me.
I love it, the fact that you can get watercolor brushes for your Photoshop. Like, I just think it's so awesome.
So spread the Reaper love. Maybe tell this lady about painting miniatures. Maybe she'd enjoy that too.
Maybe she won't know who Reaper is.
Yeah,
so
she
educate.
May not.
Educate, guys.
But spread the Reaper love. Keep being awesome.
Yeah.
And you guys, we'll see you tomorrow for more NMM at 11 o'clock.
Ever more NMMs.
Yes, spread the words and get everyone to our Twitch channel, guys.
Yes, absolutely.
So, all right. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
And you guys
have a good one, everybody.
Fantastic day. We love you. Right, Ann?
Yes, we do love you.
All right. See you guys later.